Captain? Okay. You have a fire distance from the place? You too?
Randy, you're further, John.
You're further, so you're going to call it. Okay? Okay.
The rules are different in vintage baseball than they are in modern baseball. Most notably, batters get to call their strike zone. Before they come up to bat, they tell the umpire they either want a high strike zone, in which case strikes will only be called if they're between the waist and the shoulder, or a low strike zone,
Low zone.
somewhere between the knee and the waist.
It could take 7 balls to get a walk. A hit batsman did not take his base at first. All he could get was a heartfelt apology.
Foul balls were not strikes. They didn't count. So you could stay there and swing away and hit foul balls till the cows come home and you're still alive.
The rules of vintage baseball are forever evolving. It kind of depends on what era you're playing. If we're playing the 60 era, then there's no gloves. It's underhand pitching. As we move up to the 76, 75, 76 era, that's when sidearm pitching comes into play. As we get into the 80s, that's when overhand pitching comes into play, the faster pitching. Gloves, ball game is a lot faster and a lot more dangerous.
It's about the camaraderie of it, the history of playing. We really enjoy the whole history aspect of it. And we very much like the diversity of the rules. We're one of the few teams in the New England area that has not set on a particular style of rule. We play all eras of baseball.
Fancy St. Simsbury Cavaliers will play Pittsfield Elms tomorrow in the semifinals at 11 o'clock here at Wahconah Park. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to historic Wahconah Park. This afternoon's game is between the Waterbury Connors and the Hartford Senators.
Lovely day for a game. One of my loves in the vintage game is when I get asked to umpire, and there was a single umpire in vintage baseball.
Oh.
You won't see an umpire at each bag, you won't see fielding umpires, and the umpire didn't stay directly behind the catcher as they do in modern game because he didn't have any protection on, and the catcher would play so far back that he didn't want to catch the ball in the air, he'd let it bounce.
If he missed a play, if he thought that perhaps he hadn't seen it clearly and could use some advice, he could request advice from the crowd. So, of course, the hometown crowd would always advise the umpire to call against the visiting team. And this was a gimmick that we used because staging a vintage baseball game is not pure competition as it is in Major League Baseball. Victory is desired, but it is not essential. What is essential is putting on a good show.
Well struck!
It's pretty competitive. Once you get on the field and you start throwing the ball around and playing, you want to win. You want to do well. But you also, when you're out there, you're kind of cheering on the other team when they make a great play or something like that. That's part of the fun with vintage. You're not just out there to beat that guy's brain in or you really take it to him. We're there to play baseball and do as well as we can, but it gets competitive. I mean, there are guys who are more competitive than others.
I'm not over the top screaming and yelling competitive stuff like that, except I will give 100% of what I have to play whatever I'm playing, whether it's vintage baseball or it's, stupid survivor games or something like that. When it comes down to competition, that's just the way it goes.
And after 5 1/2 innings, it's the score. The Hartford 6 and the Waterburys off. Fans, have you tasted the great new Ballantine beer? Your nickel will go quite a long way when you just say Ballantine. The sacks are full with the boys of blue. And up comes the captain himself, Grit Moran.
Now batting the center fielder, Chris Grit Moran.
He's taking a low strike zone. The captain dreams of performing in spots like this.
Ball.
And the offering is a ball. I think the pitcher for the Waterberries is getting tired. He's losing some of his moxie. He comes inside and almost hits Mr. Moran. Here comes the offering. And he takes a fungo out into the left garden, and it will drop as a fair ball. The Senators plate one. Fleetwood comes across the plate another. So the captain comes through, a very clutch hit and a good effort. Some of the terminology of the vintage game comes directly from newspapers of the era. And the first word that we see is a word called crank. And a crank is what we would call a fan today. The batter was called a striker, and the umpire would address him as striker to the line or striker toe the line, because they didn't have a batter's box. They had a line that he'd have to toe up to face his hurler. The hurler was a pitcher. The catcher was a behind. And one of the differences between the vintage game and the modern game is that in the modern game, the emphasis is more on the pitcher, who's pitching. But back in vintage game, it's the battery, because the catcher and the pitcher are a team. And the catcher historically had as much to do with the outcome of the game as the pitcher did.
Thank you for playing us today. Hip hip! Huzzah! Hip hip! Huzzah! Hip hip! Huzzah!
Huzzah!